All right. Here we go. Oh, I keep seeing the participant numbers tick up here. So we're gonna, 1 more minute. We'll start at 5 past. Welcome all of you who are joining. We're going to start in 1 minute. You are in the right place for the great AI replacement debate. So just hang tight.
I answered a question in the question channel.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate you jumping on that.
How many people were on the call? And I said, including AI note takers and bots, question mark.
Nice. All right. Good morning, everyone. Let's get started. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to the Great AI Replacement Debate, headlined by 3 of Progress Partners executives in residence. So we have a couple of outsiders on this call, which is very exciting. So I'm going to take a step back and just give a quick overview of Progress and why we're here and how this originated. So Progress is a boutique tech-focused merchant bank. So we have an investment banking group whose foundation is media, ad tech, and martech, but in practice really branches out to any tech vertical that you can apply digital transformation to. So that may be SaaS, data, cybersecurity, GovCon, tech services, creative agencies, etc. And then we also have a venture team. The venture team is currently deploying out of their 4th fund and about to go to market to raise Fund 5 within the next 6 to 12 months. And historically, they too have been focused on tech, most specifically B2B, ad tech, and MarTech, with this next fund branching out even further. And as I opened up, I mentioned that Progress Partners is a boutique investment bank. And I want to really emphasize that because internally we have about 35 employees. But a huge differentiator for our group is our executive and resident network. We have over 125 different tech executives with a variety of vertical experience, positional experience, company stage experience. And we call on them to be our eyes and ears, our guides, our teachers, our connectors, and our thought leaders. And this allows us to maintain that boutique size and service model, but gives us an incredibly vast and deep network. And so my name is Jessica Straw, and I'm the executive and resident director for Progress. I actually started as an executive and resident prior to jumping internal to the team. And today we are featuring 3 of those esteemed EIRs as panelists for this debate. This actually originated as an impromptu conversation during one of our regular meetings, and it was so insightful and a little polarizing and spicy and really just plain fun that we all wanted to hear more. And as a result, here we are. So we've opened this up, as I mentioned, beyond our typical EIR group, and we hope that all of you are ready to listen and learn and participate and enjoy. So here's how this is going to work. I am going to introduce the 3 EIRs. They are each then going to give their perspective on AI and their position on the current view and future. We'll then let them opine on each other's positions and jump into questions for all of them to address and build upon. And with the vast number of attendees that we have to keep everyone on mute. But please, please, please raise your virtual hands. You can see in the little diagram on the slide where to do that, or fire questions into the chat. We want you to challenge opinions. We want you to expand on theories. We want everyone to have fun. All right, that should be it. Enough of my blabbing. So let's jump right into these intros here. So our first EIR is David Berkowitz. David is the founder of the AI Marketers Guild, FOF, and serial marketer, pun intended. For those of you in the dark on that, David Berkowitz also happens to be American serial killer, aka the son of Sam. But our David is a different David, I promise. He's been an EIR with Progress for 1.5 years. And so David, thank you for joining us. And next we have Sasha G. Sasha hails from our friendly neighbor to the north. He's an award-winning CEO with a really strong product background. And a little fun fact, he graduated from Singularity University, which is a program founded by tech intellects like Google and NASA. He's been an EIR for 3 years. And Sasha, thank you for joining us. And then finally, we have Scott Messer. Scott is an executive media operator with a penchant for monetization. He's well known across the ad tech scene, and he's a very vocal supporter of publishers and creators. He's self-described Twitter or X pundit, and he's also a new dad. He's been in EIR for 3 years. Scott, glad to have you. Yes, dad mug. All right. With that, David, we are going to start with you. Please share your current viewpoint on AI as it pertains to the replacement debate.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. Thanks everyone for being here, and kind of daunting to do this, especially ahead of just everything I've already been learning from Scott and Sasha, and I'm looking forward to way more. So I'll tee up a few things really quickly here. First and foremost, like, I love AI. I love experimenting with it. Like, I've used AI to write really bad books that AI has written entirely. Find these on Amazon. I don't recommend doing so. I'm actually working on a real book about AI where I've had to set the rule for myself that I'll use AI to help me brainstorm and outline, but every word of it has to be written myself. That's my rule, not the publishers. And so it's even just like trying to actively navigate it. I use it for fun. I'm trying to work my way through a print version of the world's oldest novel, The Tale of Genji from Japan. And I realized I couldn't keep track of all the characters in the 1,100 pages. It seems like there are at least 1,100 characters. And so I started using AI and saying, like, I'm at this point, can you help me understand this better? And now I've got this reading coach that I wouldn't have had before, and allows me to tackle things maybe I couldn't have tackled before. My daughter and I cook all the time thanks to AI. And yes, like, it does replace going to a lot of these horrifically ad-filled recipe sites where you can't even find the recipe. But it also allows us to customize things and saying, well, we prefer this ingredient, or make this a third of the size. Then, we can do all the stuff that you can't do with a recipe site. And so all this means that it's just, I'm learning a lot personally, but also professionally. I've taken on projects over the past year that I couldn't have taken on myself, thanks to some of the AI tools available to go and analyze, assimilate, aggregate some of this information, and help make sense of it better, and output it in a format that the client could use. And this is stuff, by the way, that probably didn't replace, but definitely didn't replace another agency or something like that because of the budgets. And a lot of these things had very specialist needs that the client probably wouldn't have even tried doing this project, or maybe had a junior member of their own team work on it, because it required some very specialized knowledge that in those cases I've had. So just a few kind of tenets and overarching things that will apply to anything I'll further be sharing today. One is, with AI, it is now and increasingly will be more important to be an editor than a writer. As a lifelong writer. I was like writing book reports on WordPerfect when I was like 6, 7 years old. This is something that's kind of painful to me in some ways, exciting in others. And I mean writer very, very liberally, right? Like a data analyst. Like you don't always have to come up with the data. You know, any of these raw materials, it could be legal, right? Like you might not have to create everything from scratch, but you have to be an extremely good editor to make sense of this. And this is where a lot of the opportunity is. Second, the most important word that I think comes up with AI is yet, right? And so good, bad, ugly. If you're saying, well, AI can't do this, AI hasn't done this, and it could be something like no one's created a deep fake of me, well, just add yet, right? Like, yeah, well, there's no way doctors can be replaced, right? Well, yet, and there are probably some caveats here, right? Like for certain skills that that certain doctors have, maybe AI can actually help offload some of that, and we could actually get back to more personal care. The third one is that that what I've seen over the past 10 years is that AI now can deliver what I'd call insights. And I know that there are some debates as far as can AI be creative? Can AI be insightful? Because these feel core to what makes us human. But I think about this in a way where if you look at what can come out of some of the better iterations of AI, and if you're asking the right questions of it, if someone handed this to me and I didn't know if it's sort of like a Turing test, right? Like if I didn't know whether an AI or human created it, there are things that I'd swear are as insightful as some of the best humans I've worked with could do. And then the fourth piece I'll share, and all this is just coming from just a lot of what I'm seeing across the community and everything else. I before this, and I don't know if there's another slide teed up with some of this information, but I did a little experiment the past couple of days. Here we go, where and I'd done this a while back and didn't get such great responses, but now AI keeps getting better. So it was a fun excuse to revisit this question, where I wanted to ask a number of different AI engines, are the best case scenarios more salient than the worst case scenarios for AI? And so I had ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Anthropic's Claude, Perplexity, and then Meta AI all go through, and some of them really didn't want to, by the way. Some of these I had to like beg. I was like, well, Claude and Gemini are doing it, or some of them I'd be like just come on, just like as a thought experiment, humor me. And they all complied once. Like ChatGPT was like all in, like I got you, bro. But then with all of them, what was fascinating, now Perplexity really did not want to take sides here, but the others were game to do this. And if you look at some of the best case scenarios, like advances in healthcare, maybe economic equality and opportunity, environmental sustainability, education, or you look at the worst case, right? Like exacerbating inequality, threatening privacy, risks with weapons and things like that, and like how deepfakes can subvert things. Then the worst cases all for 4 out of 5 were actually worse than the best cases are good. And this is the thing that fears me, that scares me. I still think we have to control what we can control, but this is something that I don't think we can escape either.
Fabulous, David. Okay, we're going to have everyone hold off on comments and challenges and opinions until we hear from both Sasha and Scott. But David, great way to start. Thank you so much. Sasha, you're up next. Let's hear it.
Thanks, Jessica, and it's a real pleasure to be a part of this event. So I think it's pretty easy to become increasingly fatigued by this whole domain of AI. In one sense, the pace of innovation of deep learning-based generative AI is really breathtaking, but simultaneously, it's also confusing, prone to hyperbole, fear, grift, and exploit. What's also really interesting about this whole domain is the proximal nature of this technology as to who we are as a species. Part of the reason why this feels existential is because this new generation of AI is doing things that are mimicking our marked advantages as a species. It's writing, it's creating, it has the appearance of being able to reason, even though it can't. So here we are immersed in a debate to determine the fate of our society. Sure, there's risk. The fate of civilized discourse, there's also risk. And the fate of the economy. I think there's a lot less risk here. But to really answer these questions, we need to understand technology. What is technology? Do we really understand what it is? Luckily, there have been many thinkers that have spent a lot of time to really dive into the understanding of what technology is. And one that comes to mind that is a bit of a favorite of mine comes from kind of an early 20th century philosopher. And his thinking was, where technology is applied, truth is revealed. Because technology and its application forces us to order things and make choices as to what we want to represent in it and what we do not want to represent in it. Our inner truths emerge through its application. Another way to think about this is that when we apply technology, what we really value starts to reveal itself to us. Our values are the things that matter, not the AI. But one of the confounding parts of this whole debate in the form of AI is because of how it's built, ingesting the world's content and information, its form already embodies our values in a weird kind of way. It embodies our knowledge, our biases, and there's many of those in the training data, our best selves and occasionally our worst selves. It's representative of us, our knowledge, our way of being. So what does that actually mean as it relates to this debate? Well, I would contest that most of these questions about AI have nothing to do with AI. I think the entire debate is about what we value. Do we value media content enough to defend its viability as an industry? I think we do, and I think we will. Do we value human-centric creativity enough to fund it and support it? I also believe that to be the case. So where do I think this is going, and what do I think that those impacts will be? I think the best way to think about this generation of AI is that it's a new kind of compute, an approach to computation. It computes information in context and generates probabilistic responses based on that context. It will likely reform the way we use technologies that rely on computers. Our data centers will become more important and likely transform the ways our companies intelligently operate. I think there's a very high probability of that. Our hardware will become more important, starting to push the boundaries on speed, capacity, and energy consumption. Our applications will become more important, giving us a more natural way to engage with our technologies, solving natural language inputs in a way that makes information retrieval and code generation easier. I think information will become bifurcated into categories of generation, use, and trust. And I think we've already started to see this. Intelligence will continue to be modeled, but not understood. While this can be similarly said about our understanding of human intelligence in its current form, current LLMs have limited to no ability to generalize and use transfer learning from one context to another. That may change, but these systems are not intelligent. My assertion today is that the impacts that people fear most have little to do with AI or, frankly, technology itself. It has to do with the values that lie at the heart of that development. If your values are clear, just, and are considerate of the externalities and the unforeseen consequences, AI will have positive impacts to the many categories of its potential use. If those values are exploitive, we will see those impacts as well. We all have choices ahead. Understand how this stuff works so you can be informed as to the ordering and truth that sits at the heart of its construction. Thanks very much, and I look forward to the debate.
Fabulous, Sasha. I love it. Scott, you are next.
Hello, everybody. This is fantastic. Sasha, I really enjoyed that. And David, thank you for bringing up recipe websites. First and foremost, we're here to discuss the ways to identify and embrace or brace for the change in the face of artificial intelligence and its older cousin, machine learning. We're still in this era of the information and communication and technology revolution that started in the 1970s. And AI may be the final push to the apex, where we finally reach the social, economic, and environmental progress that comes with the apex of the technological revolution. I want to share with you some of what concerns me the most, and then I'm going to close here with what scares me the most. There will always be winners and losers. That's business. I think Sasha outlined some of that, and David talked about it a little bit. In times of advancement, the pace of change is slow enough normally to let industries and humans adapt. But when you're inside revolutions, that change is swifter, and the result can be a total upheaval of the status quo. Since this ICT revolution is nearly 50 years old, we should know how to manage it. But the truth is that technology is changing faster and faster before, so we can't really escape this installation period and hit the distribution period. Oddly enough, humans are living longer, they're staying in their jobs longer, so we're holding on to our old ways longer than before. So this transition is happening not just between generations, but across generations. While there will be benefits, there will be a lot of advancements that will largely benefit the consumer and the corporation. Most of the losers will be the creators and operators of information, because technology is here to disintermediate that relationship. You see, friction is important to business. Every day we try to create friction in order to create a moat around our IP so that we can monetize that IP in a commanding fashion. This is my theory of what I call exit through the gift shop. Friction is what creates margin in media distribution. If there is no friction, there is no attention, there is no attendance, there is no turnstile, there is no subscription, there is no retention, there is no business model. Dominance in technology and markets is what allows you to create this friction. And disruptor technologies, well, it destroys that friction. AI and several confluent factors of the time have fatally removed the friction that energized the open web as we know it. I'm a staunch supporter of publishers and information, and David, we're going to talk a lot about, do we care enough to save media as the way we know it? I think so. But if AI is here and technology really is here to remove friction, in this case, humans are the friction. We'll talk later about what it means to go from software as a service to services as a software. But what scares me the most, I want to share something that I call the apocalyptic internet. It was the genesis of this conversation. And it's a pretty frightening place of where we might wind up. In short, the reductions to the barriers of entry that AI has enabled has oversaturated the web with content, most of it being garbage. And AI is here to solve that problem. This affects Google. It affects generative AI search. It's about the way that consumers want to access information. You now have an app in your pocket that is a doctor, that is a lawyer, that is an answer machine. So the emergence of AI and generative search engines has and will continue to collapse the long tail of the internet. This has been compounded by a monopolistic search engine protecting its own interests and trying to unbork what's called the enshittification of the internet, which was largely spurned by AI content tools. Further, traffic of this content and the remaining content on the web is increasingly less valuable due to the intervening distribution mechanisms like Apple News and Gen AI, Perplexity, and all those, but also the effects of browser privacy and government regulation. That's the confluence of the factors. But all of this is strangling the publisher and creator monetization model. It is harder to operate an information and content business. On the other hand, you have the AI services, which are essentially becoming subscription access for knowledge of the internet, and thus don't really require advertising because they're subscription models. And this will have profound effects on not only the way that we interact with the internet, but also how we build for the consumption of information. And you also have to think those who can't afford a subscription, disadvantaged citizens in society, may not be able to access this new form of the internet, or they'll get some watered down version of it, or some version that's not up to date. But what gets really weird is when you realize that these newspapers go out of business and that journalists aren't really required anymore. But consumers still seek information, but it's what content is expensive. So these AI platforms and their subscription business are going to hire journalists and have them enter facts directly into the AI models and their LLMs. Why do you need a newspaper? If people are just going to ask Perplexity, what was the score last night? Maybe it's drones on the sidelines or robots in the stands taking pictures. That's all possible. But the truth is that journalism can die if we don't protect it. So let's leave it there and open the
Mic
debate.
drop. Mic
Thank you.
drop. Scott, let's do that. Let's open this up. First with the three of you, each great perspectives, but varying. So have at it, guys.
Well, why don't I start? I'll take a slight opinion on some of the information that's been shared, and maybe that'll spur some discussion. So I think there's a ton of risk out here with regards to data and asset creation, and undoubtedly there is loads of risk associated with deepfakes and synthetically generated information. So one of the interesting things that I think is a counterpoint to this that will, I think, offer opportunities for the continuity of ingenuity of humans and the creation of original content, especially high quality content, is that when you start to incorporate synthetic data into model training, those models start to degrade and collapse. So there's been some recent research to show that, for example, when you're training an image model to be able to generate images from free-form text, if you ingest that model with synthetic images or AI-created images, the model starts to degrade and generate poor quality. So I think that there's instances and examples of the value of high-quality information. Also, to the point of recency, so Scott's point with regards to sports scores as an example, these models are not live and dynamic. These things are fixed within a particular period of training. And the ability in which to ingest, kind of use like recency of information is going to continue to exist outside of the domain of the traditionally formed LLMs that we understand today, because you can't update a model as quickly as you know, the scores of all the various different sports that happen. And you see this, and we use examples with the current LLMs. What they do actually is they either broker deals with news sources, or what they'll do is they'll push to search. So traditional forms of information retrieval, which, by the way, all of this is. So with that being said, I think the premium for information, whether it's recency-based, whether it's expert-based, will continue to be of high value. And I fundamentally disagree that there's this death knell of journalism and there's a death knell of high quality, human-centric creativity and expression. Whereas, just point to those two examples, and even an analogy around the premiums that we're paying here for television rights associated with sports teams, just proves that disintermediation with technology doesn't necessarily mean the death of creativity.
I think the unprofitability of some of those sports rights deals is showing you that, you know, it's not that great. Look, you're right about quality of entertainment and quality of information, and some of the things that I think that will survive really well, I've always said, are comedy and in-depth journalism. It's real investigative reporting and the depth. And that may be, you know, using David. I want to have a sign that just says "yet" that I can hold up, Sasha, every time you say one of these, and just be like, "Yet." The problem is that if the pace of AI continues through society the way that it does, there may be a rift in media and technology that is unrecoverable. We've already seen numerous newspapers go out of business for a bunch of reasons that weren't AI, really technology, access of information. It's the friction of distribution that got removed when everything went digital. And now we're seeing a faster change in them, with Axios laying off 50 people, and they cited specifically that AI can aggregate and summarize news faster than ever before, and that copycats can spin up faster and steal their models. It's becoming harder and harder to find a sustainable business model around the monetization of content, whether that's video content or text content.
And so this is where one of the things that I'm worried about here is like, and this is why I like using what feels like a kind of frivolous example of recipe sites, because I think there's a microcosm, and then I want to zoom out to the macrocosm, right? Because and actually, as I was just like going deeper into this one use case, I even asked a couple friends of mine to write this great AI marketing ethics newsletter. I'm like, am I being unethical by asking ChatGPT for these recipes? There are no ads. I don't know where it's sourcing the information from. Literally every time I've tried a ChatGPT recipe, and they are many and varied now, they've all been some of the best versions of that thing that I've had, from cupcakes to pork belly. Do a whole other session on that. But if you look at those recipes, first of all, like, I don't know where to go in the first place, so I'm going on Google. I'm looking at the things that have at least like a number of reviews. That maybe I'm a little suspicious if it just has like 10 only 5-star reviews. So I find something that has more, but maybe not quite as good. So it feels like there's a little bit more human interaction with it. And then it's like from a consumer side, it is one of the worst user experiences that I encounter online. And similar to some other publishers where you go, and I don't want to necessarily name names here, but you see like the half-page banner ad, and then the video pops up, and it's just like, get me to this freaking article. So you probably do anything if you can to get rid of that, whether it's just paying or going incognito or whatever you can do to avoid stuff like that. On the other hand, there are creators here, right? And there are publishers and things like that. They're doing what they've learned to do to game the system in their own way, game SEO, and get where they're going. And they're just trying to make a buck, right? Like most people would not want to be in the publishing business, whatever it is. Scott, to a lot of points there, because it's so tenuous. So when I'm searching for some of this in an LLM, and there isn't any of that monetization attached to it, maybe for like the New York Times or Axel Springer or something like that, that they're getting a cut, and they've got some deal for giving an LLM access to their data. Most of these independent publishers are not. And so it's like now we have Search GPT that's rolling out for folks, and like the business model, the economics are really different. I don't think the SEO is actually all that different, because still, to Sasha's point, a lot of them are drawing from the traditionally like top ranked results in places like
What's the point of being the top ranked result if we're not linking out, or you're not exiting through the gift shop for your information?
Yep.
Hey, Scott, we have a question in our chat that asks,
Okay.
can you just re-explain exiting through the gift shop?
Yeah. Exit through the gift shop is the idea of monetization, predominantly for a digital publisher, but it applies to a larger thing. So let me explain it through a digital publisher lens. Exit through the gift shop means when a user visits your page, you want them to take any action that is monetizable. The only action that's not monetizable is closing the browser or hitting the back button. So whether they see an ad, that's monetizable. If they click on an ad, that's great. If they click on an affiliate link, that's great. If they sign up for a subscription or have a subscription, those are all points in the gift shop. I don't really care about people visiting my site if I can't monetize them. Like ad block users, I've long said that Safari traffic, which is a third of the value of regular traffic, and really Apple News, which is only 10% the value of real traffic, isn't that important to me as a publisher. I would rather block Safari users more aggressively because they have less value until they turn on cookies or let them monetize them in a better way. So I may push a subscription thing harder than I would on Chrome. That's the idea of exit through the gift shop.
So look, I mean, I take the points here. I understand like there's monetization risks associated with content and media. I mean, you're comparing like a 15-year boom in economic investment and growth into a category that was kind of like net new early 2000s, compared to like a domain that is maybe 18 months old, that has high reliance on information and data for it to be ultimately be performant. And the models are already starting to work themselves out, where you see massive publishers making huge deals with LLM companies to monetize assets that may not even have to do with the form that exists with those assets. And what I mean specifically by that is that if you look at volumes of video libraries of historical sports as an example, there's utility to that training data in application areas that have nothing to do with sports. They actually have to do with robotics. So when you start to think about like the death nail of the media website that's benefited from 15 years of like buoyant investment compared to 18 months of a brand new way of computation and compute, with all the limitations and crap that's built into it, I think it's an unjust comparison. What we're learning now is that scaling these models is becoming increasingly difficult. It's harder for these things to get smarter. Teaching these models is harder. So reinforcement learning with human feedback, which is the means in which that you improve the quality of these models, is also running into bottlenecks. We're reducing human interest to like utilities, and we're commenting on everything like there's this homogeneity to all assets. Like there's no like spice of life or variability that creates any value or friction in the ways in which that we kind of consume information, all of which I think is, I don't know, dubious at best. So, I mean, my sentiment and my perspective here is that it's still early days. I think there's massive limitations in terms of the current generation of generative AI. I think there's massive costs and consequences that get ignored, which is like energy consumption, poor return on investment. And frankly, these things aren't anything but glorified knowledge retrieval engines. But that being said, it's early days, and it's worth looking at these things in terms of how you can source value from how they're actually constructed, which I think is nothing but beneficial, is going to benefit expert information networks, which, by the way, media largely is.
Sasha, with that, I'm going to welcome in Adam from our audience, who has 2 questions to build off of that. So, Adam?
Yes, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So thank you for unmuting. And David, Sasha, Scott, this is awesome conversation. I guess I wanted to chime in because I think the 3 of you are having incredibly important conversations about the tectonic plates and where it's all shifting and where things are going to go in terms of adoption. But my first question was just thinking about if it is harder and harder to run content information businesses like publishers or custom research places like Gartner, the Crunchbases, or anything where LLMs can have an external threat, I think it poses a question internally to a company like that, or even just a basic manufacturing company that's not directly threatened, about how they've got sometimes thousands of employees, and how can they most effectively adopt AI to impact employee productivity, to sort of bring some of the repetitive parts of workflows into LLM generated efficiencies. And David, I know you and I, through your AIMG, have had a lot of really cool conversations about the marketing function, but there's so many functions inside a company. I kind of wanted to see if it was a good area to focus on, to ask the 3 of you, like what happens to all these employees in terms of retraining them, and how should companies think about that? Because I'm sure there are plenty of CXOs on the call just eager to just hear thoughts.
Let's put that in the bucket of like, how do you embrace AI rather than how does AI erase your business?
Yeah, good way to phrase it. As usual, Scott, far more succinct than I am.
You know, what one of the things it reminds me of is when I was at an agency as Facebook was really, coming into its own, and even for a pretty digitally savvy, forward thinking agency, there was an attempt at a Facebook ban for a while, right? You can't use this at work because it was all these concerns about this being this huge distraction, and of course. By the point Facebook got that big that there could even be a Facebook ban, everyone had this on their phones, right? So they were just looking at their phones more often at work, and none of this worked. And some of this is actually what excites me as we have what I think will be this AI generation coming into the workforce, right? Like folks who are graduating now or just entering the workforce, like they like they'll only know what it means to be in a job that has some AI support. And if their company doesn't allow them access to it, they'll find another way in. And I think that will already help try to push that. It's like, it's just trying to find a way to embrace this in a way that adheres to some like the privacy and other like legal and other regulations that have in some of the confines, like use the stuff well, and to also protect some of the output that you're doing. So it's not like if something's like AI generated, it can't even tend to claim this as your own, and then that can have a whole domino effect. But it is a great point, Adam, in terms of like how do we find a way to work with this, because this is the thing, it's not going away.
I mean, my perspective on this is that I think it's gonna, like, what in essence we're trying to do here with the development of artificial intelligence with natural language inputs is to empower people to talk to machines like they've never spoken to machines before. And you see that in image generation already, which is like you can describe in natural language the type of images that you want, and it can help you to generate those things. Now, are those things, as good as human creativity and the ingenuity of humans? No, but that being said, like, you're now affording people the opportunity to engage with technology in a way that hasn't been accessible previously. And when you look outside, like when you look at adoption for companies, there's a massive amount of opportunity here outside of just straight knowledge retrieval, which is the primary use case that most kind of businesses adopt first, which is I'm going to take all my information, I'm going to put it into a form that that the LLMs can understand, so that I can naturally, using just natural language, start to talk to that information that I have available to myself. Where it gets really exciting, and I think this is where the form of computation I think is headed, is that when you start to move out of natural language, or you start to augment natural language with embeddings and inputs that are more kind of machine-based, so sensor-based technologies that are spitting out like massive amounts of time series data, and starting to use the form in which these LLMs actually compute, you can start to make available and accessible all this information in context that would never be available for yourself in the traditional context. So there's a huge kind of opportunity to take this kind of basic technology that's been trained and adopted primarily through kind of the ingestion of information on the internet, and start to model out how companies operate, because that to me is what the huge opportunity is. But what it doesn't necessarily negate is the human functions that guide and direct choices that are contextual beyond just the very specific kind of information that these language models are being trained on. That to me is the huge opportunity here, and I think it's actually going to be quite buoyant, because humans have a fundamentally different construction in the way in which that we process information that allows you to laterally move across domains, sample information from all different forms and sorts through our senses, and then start to make choices as a response to that. LLMs can't do that. They can't generalize. They can't transfer.
So I would say though that any area that doesn't require that is at risk of dramatic shift, right? So I think about this services as a software thing. There used to be an abacus, and there was accountants that had pen and paper, and they wrote in books. And then fast forward a little bit, you had QuickBooks, which allowed you to just keep, your accounting software in a thing, but you still had to do accounting. And now there's apps that want to offer you an accountant as the service. You don't need to have QuickBooks. You don't need to know how to use it. You just email in a bunch of stuff and it does your accounting for you. That's an oversimplification, but all of the rote function of being an accountant is handled and taken care of. Now, will we get rid of accountants? No. Like, will it end accounting crime? No. But these services are now replacing what was a self-serve software. And I think it's going to eliminate large swaths of jobs in that function, but it will also allow people to have more capacity and capability. But if you're one of those jobs that don't require capacity and capability, then your job's just going to be eliminated.
The more lower level functions, right? Those will be the most.
Yeah.
Because they're more
Order
rote.
takers. And what I do like, Sasha, though, that you did mention, like Walmart just announced that they used LLMs to recategorize 850 million pieces of product data information. That's something that it said it would have taken them 100 extra workers to do it in the same amount of time. That's obviously a project that would never be greenlit, never touched, in one of those like too hard to solve things. But with like a little bit of AI and probably generally available LLMs that they customized, they were able to do this and unlock a better experience for their customer and run the business better. Did it eliminate jobs? No, because that project never would have been done. So that's a good thing.
I mean, have we not been dealing with automation for the better part of 100 years? Like this is what I don't understand. One, to reduce legal practices and accounting.
You're right, but this is the acceleration.
Hold on. To reduce accounting and legal practices to some sort of form filling is, I think, slightly misguided. And frankly, these language models are highly imprecise, subject to hallucinations, and aren't even actually fit for purpose with anything that requires precision. So, I take a completely different position on that. I think that, yes, you can train expert systems, you can narrow the focus of the LLMs, you can get better yield, better precision. However, it doesn't negate the fact that you're going to need human involvement. Also, if there's a misrepresentation in your financial filings, who are you going to sue? If you've done this all with an LLM, who are you going to sue? Who's liable? Who's signing off on that documentation? Not the LLMs.
Yeah, but Sasha,
so, look, I think that's slightly misguided.
Sasha, I think all of what you just said can be 100% spot on. And still, Scott's point about a lot of the assembling of those numbers, maybe even the initial synthesis of it. And Sasha, to your point, it's not going to be filed with the SEC, but maybe the numbers will be populated, presented. And again, maybe not in a finished P&L, but it's, hey, accountant, Jane Smith, here's what's been assembled for you. It is now incumbent upon you to far more efficiently apply the most sophisticated parts of your accounting expertise. And yes, you're on the hook for whatever numbers you submit, but we've removed maybe 90% plus of the rote exercise of raw data assembly and even some of the lower level data synthesis.
So
guys, let's look at this from a slightly different perspective. Brandon threw up a great question in the chat. So his question is, I'm convinced the insight around quality, cream rising to the top, is the core component for the future. What do you think about the ability of the individual or a small group now being as powerful as what were previously only available to large organizations? Is AI actually about empowering David, not our David, but maybe our David, versus Goliath?
Well, this is also something where when I mentioned being able to take on projects I couldn't have pitched before, because like something that would have been like a $50,000 to $100,000 project just based on hours that go into it, like I could do for 10, and the client was never going to pay for a $50,000 project. Then a lot of this does wind up being additive, and it winds up allowing me to compete in areas like analysis that I can do better, but I can't. I'm not necessarily a market researcher, right? I can use some of these tools to help me in ways like that. I think this is also something where I guess also tying into some of Sasha's points here, one of the challenges I think will be, as all this rolls out and as so many of us around the world feel empowered to tap into AI, is when we don't know those limitations, right? And when we see something as a finished product or close to it, and it's like it's not ChatGPT's job to tell us, how, if this is 50 or 99% of the way there. And there are things that I've seen that LMs could spit out that are practically 100% there, because I've shared them with clients. I've said, AI has helped with this. Like, what do you think? And they're like, publish this now, right? Like, it's usually lower, risk stuff than something that's like going to be in an earnings report. But I think like especially for for those who are using these as co-pilots and agents and assistants. Like there's a lot of opportunity right now, but there is also a lot of risk if you don't know what the risks are of using it.
I mean, my perspective is that, like, absolutely, like you have the ability to empower small groups to be able to do massively important things. I think the risk here is mostly like the whole idea of like a reversion to the mean, which is where you have represented it in any type of LLM, a certain compendium of information that they've been trained on. And the results and the outputs of it will kind of give you the best quality answer that will be the average. And one of the limitations, and I think one of the big opportunities here with the space, is diversity of models and diversity of applications. So I think there's huge opportunity in expert models, which are much more specific, that are trained on the right types of information to be able to generate kind of better yields and better precision. I think sovereign AI is important. So I think multiple different language-based models have to be there. Country-based models have to be there. Diversity of data inputs. There's massive underrepresentation of visible minorities in these models and the contents associated with them. All of these things offer great opportunities for small groups to pick up this technology and what will likely be a massive amount of latent compute, because right now everybody's overinvested into it, and build really compelling, narrow applications that will service a particular kind of group and create value that's highly differentiated from these large general models. So I'm hugely kind of enthusiastically bullish on that. Again, but it comes down to what we value. And I think that's the point here. It's if we value some like reversion to the mean where everything's we're happy with the, you know, basic average, then that's what we're going to get.
Sasha, with our 5 minutes remaining, let's take that comment on over investing in compute. And Paul and Susan Holiday had a question about the costs of AI, both in actual money and also environmental costs. Do you feel either of those will hinder the speed at which AI has already presented itself in all of the changes? And let's see what else. She's assuming this cost will come down. Is there more attention to accounting for disclosure of energy use that could kind of change the cost benefit balance?
I mean, I'll be very quick on this. My take is that the current approach to training is hitting a threshold that is no longer economically viable or environmentally viable. I think there's going to be increased levels of scrutiny, but I actually think that we're getting better at different techniques to improve the efficiency of these models, not only in their development, but techniques associated with like sampling of information. And the real risk here is that the amount of money that's pouring into these companies by both the cloud providers, who are deeply self-interested, and venture capital associated with these kind of potential home run returns, just propagates the approach of just scaling through information and compute. As we've seen over and over again, the returns aren't there. There's no profitable AI companies that are doing kind of foundational models, and the environmental consequences can be dire because the energy consumption is so high. And the new generation of NVIDIA chips are going to be even worse.
And also, like, I mean, Amazon took 9 years to have a full profitable year. Uber took about 15, right? And so there's also some of this, I think, some of this danger of concentration of the rich getting richer. And so if we have all of that access to knowledge by a few like extremely well-funded folks, then like, what does that mean for information access?
Excellent point. Okay. With that, let's leave it as a question that David posed, and then hopefully we will all gather again in the future to do this once again. With that, all of our headliners, David, Sasha, and Scott, have their email addresses up on the slides. Please feel free to be in touch with them. There are still a handful of open questions that we are going to do our best to get answers for you for, or connect you with the appropriate EIR so you can get you can dial down further into the conversation. Leaving it open for David, Sasha, and Scott to have final closing remarks. Anything from either of you? All of you?
I think you just got to watch your own business. You have to get smart in AI and how you use it, and understand very truthfully where you sit in this technological revolution. Will you be taken out with process, or do you sit in a place to take advantage of the reorganization of the way that consumers access information and entertainment?
I'll just say, like, through all these waves that I've seen in terms of search, social, mobile, Web3, there's never been anything more visceral, never been anything as AI, never been anything where you can do as much, even if you're using dummy data or just testing things on your own to get a sense of how this stuff works. And it's just like learn by doing as much as possible, so you can try to come up with some of your own opinions, because nothing beats that experience, and you can have that with AI.
My final thoughts are just that where we have probably the greatest risk as a society is probably associated with accountability and slight ignorance as to how this stuff is actually works and built, because we ultimately all need to hold these technologists accountable for what they're building, because it's built off of human knowledge, and its impacts has material downstream risks, but then also benefits. So understand how this stuff works, understand what values sit at the heart of that construction, hold them accountable. Otherwise, you're just going to go along for the ride, and the consequence, you might get swept up in the consequence.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Thank you for everyone who attended and joined. And for all of our normal EIRs, as always, thank you for leaning into previous AI discussions to help shape this event today. With that, everyone, have a wonderful day, and we will see you on the next Progress webinar.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jeff.
Bye-bye.